The Guardians are adding some World Series experience to their roster, and that experience is Austin Hedges. We'll talk about why on Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to get started today. I do want to deal with one of the rumors right off the top. We are not going to perform this podcast a la Austin Hedges. This is not going to be shirtless Locked On Guardians. You don't have to quickly turn off your YouTube video and go ready to the hills.
I was ready.
We're not gonna hedge this. It was weird. Like when this came out, like we're like, could this be a minor league deal? And it is interesting that like he got $5 million last year, he got $4 million this year. There was health issues. Cam Gallagher was the worst hitter in baseball last year. 3 previous years, the worst hitter in baseball is Austin Hedges. But what he does as a teammate, what he does as a defensively, what he does, like the stuff you can't measure, must be valuable because Cleveland's giving him the Brian Shaw contract, the $4 million return. And he is, listen, offensively, it's not going to be great. But I even think back to like that story about him programming the pitch FX and hacking it with some help. So it would be like swearing at the players and making them laugh on the mound. There's just something undeniable. This team we talked about, like, do they need to bring back Cole Calhoun because there's no leadership? Like, no, they instead brought back Austin Hedges. This is the leadership move. They must have felt like when he left, there was a part of him that was sorely lacking. And it's just interesting to speak to his value because you could have had Christian Bethancourt, who's definitely a better hitter, twice the hitter at half the cost, who's still a solid defender. The nice thing for Cleveland is they claimed him, had him for a little bit, and they made less than $1 million because that's what cash consideration is. It's an amount less than $1 million. Who knows what they'll get from the Marlins, if anything. But still, they took a guy who on paper is a better player at half the price and gave him away for just about free to the right to pay Austin Hedges $4 million. And I'm not sure that's a good move. I'm not sure that's a bad move. I'm not sure how to feel because I think it's Austin Hedges is hard to quantify.
I'll say, yeah, it was a very weird bit of news. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. And, you know, I have people texting me and people sending me messages on it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to wait and see like what happens here. Because immediately you were like, okay, there's no way they're going to pay Austin Hedges $4 million and then Christian Bethancourt it was a projected $2.3 million in arbitration coming up, and he was just a waiver claim. I'm like, then they have David Fry and they have Bo Naylor. So my two things were either they're trading Bethancourt or Bo Naylor blew out his knee playing like pickup hockey. Like that was the only two things that made any sense. And I'm like, please, dear God, be number one, not number two. If we're talking about those two things, like. That's the only I could really think of. So I'm like, given everything that happened on Twitter this weekend with Shohei Ohtani and everything else, I was like, just gonna wait. We're gonna see what else because I thought maybe
I had like a 0.5% chance, maybe like we're gonna move Bo Naylor to the outfield. Like this was like they were gonna do something crazy. Like I didn't know.
I don't know. So I was like, I'm gonna wait and see what happens and see what else gets announced. And the first source it came from, I was like a little bit leery. I was like, maybe. Because I was like, maybe it makes more sense that it's a minor league deal and he's going to, could be worth $4 million if he makes a team, whatever. Because truth be told, and I'll get into more reasons why I think you're right about the Austin Hedges and the unquantifiable, but it just seemed weird that they give him just $4 million because he was a terrible hitter last year. He hasn't hit above, not the batting average is the end all be all, obviously, but the guy hasn't even hit above 200 since 2018. And yes, we talked about when they made the Bethancourt claim, right? That we were like, okay, they just took their F to a C, and improving your roster from Fs to Cs can make a huge difference on the margins, and that's how Cleveland needs to win. And
they went F to C to D.
Yeah, like this is technically still an upgrade over Cam Gallagher. Like it's hard to get worse. He was a -17 WRC plus. He was a negative in WAR. There were little defensive things that they liked, whatever. I think Hedges does all those defensive things better than Gallagher. And yeah, and instead of a negative 17 WRC plus, you're talking about a 24, which again, 100th league average. So both these guys are still at the bottom of the barrel offensively. And Bethancourt, for what it's worth, last year was a 74 WRC plus, and again, 100's average. The year before was 100. So you were talking about a guy who you could have possibly paid less than Hedges, approximately like $1.5 million or more or less for potentially an upgrade, and at least offensively speaking. And, he had 2 years of club control. Bethancourt had 2 years before he was a free agent. So they could have had Bethancourt pretty cheap for the next 2 years. Instead, they did move him. And by the way, it's our buddy Andrew on Twitter, Fever Dog, who is very good at reading the opaque rules of baseball and figuring out these little details. Let us know that when you trade a player for cash considerations, it is capped at 100,000. You cannot trade a player for more than 100,000. You could add cash, like you can say, I'm going to trade where the team's going to trade cash to this team, like specific money. But when it's cash considerations, I think, like when you're paying down someone's salary, that's a difference. But cash considerations is capped at $100,000. So, Cleveland doesn't make any money back on giving Bethancourt to the Marlins for nothing. So on paper, all the things you can quantify, yeah, it looks like a downgrade. It's very weird, on the whole of things, but you're right. There are things that you can't quantify. And I think at time, this is one of those things where I think it's strange. Like one of the things on my list, what we talked about earlier in the offseason about how, what are the important things Cleveland needs to do this offseason? And I said I wanted to upgrade a backup catcher. I wanted to see if Cleveland did that. And I thought they did it. I don't know if it was at top of my list, but, it was one of those things. But it's also, is it a spot really worth getting worked up about? Because in hopefully Austin Hedges is getting 60 games played. Like that's what you don't want more than that from him. And you're thinking, okay, is $4 million really worth paying a guy who is going to play 60 games max? That's your hope. That's the hard part here for me. Is I think there are a lot of unquantifiable things Hedges does. I don't think there's any doubt that he's a beloved teammate. People like him for a reason. He's still a solid defender, even though he's abhorrent.
His arm is starting to get, which is an issue. That his arm is getting worse his pop times. Like the part of the game that we're seeing more action in is the part of the game he's doing as well.
That is the thing that I don't really love is that how bad last year Cleveland did controlling the run game, and you thought a backup catcher like Bethancourt would be able to help you with that, and Hedges is a little bit less reliable there. But again, like I said, he's well liked. He's still a solid. He's a better framer than Bethancourt. He is a better blocker than Bethancourt. So there is that. I think the hard part to think about all this though is that this is a team that says they're uncertain about where their payroll is going to be, what they can add. They seem like they're strapped, or they have a hard time operating, not knowing what's going to happen with their TV deal, right? Yeah. So
they've always paid a lot for that backup catcher. Like remember when people were having fits over, Luke Maile, and then even when they had Perez and Hedges, like they have always put high value on this position outside of last year.
Correct. They always have. And which was a very strange year with Cam Gallagher. But I think what's hard to look at with this is that you're paying $4 million. This is a team that doesn't know how much money, well, they probably have an idea of how much money they're in payroll. They just won't say. But I refuse to believe they have zero operating knowledge with their payrolls. They may not know what they're going to get from their TV deal. That is up in the air. But yeah. For a team that
I think they have an idea. Like the Padres gave a baseline a year ago. We've seen it reported in some places that, it should be around 40 million. And we also know, again, to go back to last month's episode, they've changed who gets money from the luxury tax. It's not all teams.
Right. It's going to teams that don't have
teams. So, and it was a record year for the luxury tax. So even with TV money being down, that is another way they're going to get money to help equal that out. They have to know what their operating budget is. And they're probably, again, waiting. They viewed this as an important piece, an important player. They needed that leadership. The team, listen, the minute they signed Cole Calhoun was all the talk is they had no leadership. So this is getting the leadership, getting a trusted guy, all that stuff outside and around. And then I still think there is some side money. I don't think it's Josh Bell money. It might be Mike Zunino money. But I think they're probably still waiting to see who slides through the cracks like every year. This team is a bunch of buzzards. They're a bunch of possums. Give me another scavenger creature that wants to feast on remains. That's what the Guardians are, because they have to be right now.
Right. And that's my entire point here, is that you could have paid, and let's be clear. Again, this is a backup catcher. This team does need leadership. I think that was clear last year at times. And Hedges is as good as they come. I think everybody can see that. But paying him $4 million, and you're not going to, okay, so Christian Bethancourt was due 1.3 or 2.3. You're giving Hedges 4. That's like 1.7 million difference. What kind of player are you getting for $1.7 million? Right. Well, that's my question there. But also, I can understand why it's hard to swallow paying Austin Hedges $4 million, because this is a team that doesn't claim to have a whole lot of money to spend. Can you really say it's wise money to spend on a backup catcher who you hope is going to play 60 games? I don't know. Like, again, I know there are unquantifiable things here, and I definitely agree with that. Those things all make sense to me as well. It's just this team has a lot of other places they need to upgrade. They have a lot of other things to address. And I understand why people would be scratching their heads and being a little upset why you would pay a guy who is as bad as at baseball in terms of offense, $4 million like Hedges, even if he is a good leadership guy and defense. Like, I think it's okay to say, like, is this really the best use of $4 million for a team that's a little cash strapped or claims they're cash strapped? I don't know, but I think it's worth. I understand the argument over it. I do.
I think we should probably kick the break. We can come back and talk about this, talk about the trade, talk about more. I also have a big important question to ask you when we come back from the break, one that I think everyone's going to enjoy that I did not prepare Justin for. So I think we'll kick the break, come back, and you're going to get to hear the big important question of the night.
Fantastic. I love quizzes. I was so good at them in high school. I'm not much better at betting than I was at quizzes in high school or college, for that matter. I was better in college, but not quite as good at the whole FanDuel thing. I made some bets. I'm gonna make some bets during the college football season. We'll see how those goes. But maybe you're better than me. You want to score with FanDuel if you're a new customer. America's number one sportsbook. If you are a new customer, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. So all you got to do is put $5 down, select a money line if you're a new customer, and win. And if you win, you get the $150 to spend, maybe for bowl season, maybe some college basketball, maybe you're feeling good about the NFL. It was a weird weekend in the NFL, I will say. If you are thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get on the action. The playoff races are heating up. Like I said, there's college bowl season, all good stuff out there. And if you're not really into the money line bets, that's okay. They have a lot of other things you can do. They've got spreads, which are, I don't know, Vegas always knows, but you can try. Player props are always a fun one. I enjoy getting a good, nice player prop parlay when that works. That makes it a lot of fun. Over-unders, always a tough one, and there's other stuff you can do as well. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon this NFL season. NFL is an official partner, or FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right. What is your question? Hit me with your question.
Well, sorry, I got thrown off by timing there. So here's my question. How much would everyone in Cleveland enjoy the all shirtless show starring Austin Hedges and J.R. Smith? Isn't that something that feels like we just those two hanging out?
If it's a November parade, I'm all in. Yeah.
I just feels like those two getting into trouble. I don't even know if it has to be getting into trouble. Just those two hanging out, doing their thing. The ridiculousness that could ensue. It feels like just feels like it would be a solid YouTube show. Is the Austin Hedges and J.R. Smith experience?
I mean, like I said, if it happens in November, I'm happier, because that means it's a World Series parade. Not that I'm delusional or anything, but if it's a shirtless November for Austin Hedges in Cleveland, then maybe that's a good thing.
At the same time, at any point during last offseason, did anyone think the Arizona Diamondbacks were going to make the World Series? Baseball's weird, right?
It is.
Like,
even if you have Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman on one team. Hey, by the way, we should talk about this in the future too. I didn't add this to today's show, but I think we both think that Jose Ramirez's MVP candidate days are behind him, maybe. But hey, at least he's got one guy out of the way to beat in the AL now.
A little bit easier.
A little bit easier. I don't know how this is going to work. Like, I am curious with the playing time here, because like I said, obviously they traded Bethancourt for nothing, which is weird. Why they did that, obviously.
I also wonder, like, is there some degree of like Hedges late game replacement? Like, was Hedges like instrumental with Class A? Is there things that are going on there that they think that this could, like, if he can help Class A get even remotely, like, he had some weird batted ball luck, this and that, there's all of that, but it's like, if you think that he can just help the end of the game bullpen experience, it's like that alone is, could be worth the difference in cost.
I mean, it is going to be a young staff. It's going to be a young team. I think it's going to help him. It's going to help Stephen Vogt. I think there's an aspect of that too, right? That you have not only do you have a young team now, you also have
I need to agree of like Stephen Vogt's contract is only 3 years, so he can be replaced by Austin Hedges in 3 years' time. Is that how this is working?
Maybe, I don't know. Austin Hedges, how many years he has left? He is 31, so maybe he can succeed, or he can maybe he just transitions to a coaching role. He plays one more year at Cleveland, and then he transitions.
If like I said, he got $5 million last year after being bad. He got $4 million this year, and a team traded for him. The Rangers traded for him at the deadline. Like, he's going to be able to last a few more years if he wants.
He was the Rangers' emotional support animal, in the second half. That's essentially what he was. He was there. He was the team.
He was valued enough for a team to trade for him to do that and to pick up his contract. He made $5 million. So the Rangers essentially paid $3 million to make him an emotional support animal.
And now he's a World Series champion. He brings that to Cleveland. And look, we're not sitting there saying he's going to bring anything offensively. On the days he starts, you can assume he's going to go for 3 strikeouts. I don't think anybody's going to expect anything less, but hopefully, he's earning the $4 million behind the scenes. I know people don't love the thing. Some people, and I shouldn't say nobody, but some people do not love the idea of things you can't quantify, and some people do like that part of baseball. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it either way. I like being able to quantify things, but I also like stories like Austin Hedges, who are kind of the glue guy, and that's needed. You and I said, like you said, should they re-sign Cole Calhoun? They kept saying they needed leadership. I think this team would definitely benefit from leadership, and we said that at times last year before Calhoun was here. And again, now you have a young manager at the helm and a younger coaching staff outside of Willis. Willis is the only veteran that really came back. You have Victor Rodriguez and you have, all those guys, but it's a young coaching staff. So Hedges can help that as well. Kind of be that the middleman between the coaching staff and the young team. These guys know him. Bo Naylor should benefit from learning from him. And again, you're hoping maybe he plays 60 games and you got David Fry to work in, and you're hoping Naylor is ready to take that next step. And you don't have to worry about how much you're going to play Austin Hedges. So we'll see. It's like I said, is it the best use of $4 million or an extra 1.7? I don't know. It maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But also, like we said, what are you getting for $1.7 million in the market right now? I don't know what you're going to get. Yeah, it's not like you're not going to be able to add a great reliever. You're not going to be able to add a platoon hitter.
I mean, what Andrew Chafin, who did not have a good second half, who Arizona gave away for free, what did he get from the local guy? He signed today with the Pirates for $4.75 million.
Tigers.
Or the Tigers. I'm sorry, Tigers for $4.75 million after kind of a down year for him.
Yeah, very. I think he got lost between the numbers. I think there were some underlying numbers that suggested he got unlucky. So. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much out there you could have upgraded for $1.7 million. And what is the value of a backup catcher? I don't know. Like, is a backup catcher better on the field for you than it is in the way how Austin Hedges is going to contribute? I don't know. Those are one of the things I can't tell
for our non-baseball playing hours. It's better enjoyment for all of us. Like, I think end of the day, that's the thing. Like, when he's on the field, again, it's not going to be anything. It is going to be things he specifically does, but it's specifically his interactions with pitchers that we're hoping to see this and what's happening overall.
A very young pitching staff. And who knows, if you do trade Shane Bieber, you're looking at an even younger pitching staff possibly. So maybe there's a bigger factor to be had there with Hedges.
Yeah, this is a team that very clearly needed leadership a year ago. We stated this already, and they're doing it, right? They're going for it. This is some attempts at bringing in leadership now, some of the things that they missed, and we'll see how it works out. But it was weird. It got people talking for a deadline that's been dead outside of, the whole reporters being beholden to agents basically being shown in real time over the course of the last week.
Yeah, shout out to Bob Nightingale for that article, by the way. I'm usually not a huge
I'm
Bob
not big on
Nightingale
him,
fan,
but
that was a great article.
Yeah, if you missed it, go look at Bob Nightingale. He wrote it. Basically, here's what happens. And he says all the things that we never say out loud, which is like, hey, yeah, go look what agents,
we do say it's out loud.
Yeah,
We do.
But it's like, I don't think we've ever said directly like, hey, go look what players, agents, and reporter agents are the same. And then you know why they're getting fed information, or him just calling out like how deals get made up or what is asked of people to. And here's the thing, end of the day, the way all media and reporting occurs is that the agents let it go. It's almost never from the teams. It's agents, and it's that. And it's, you give a little to take a little. And yeah, I thought Bob Nightingale, whose stuff I almost never read, this was the time where he really shined.
Knocked out of the park. Yeah. And, he said the writers are the ones that let agents use them, and you could see which writers it happens to. And he said he's guilty of it as well. At least he was transparent and honest about it. And
he brought up times that he blew it. Like he called himself out. He didn't just say, yeah, and I've done it too. I give him credit for using the exact example.
100%. But it's a good line to follow going forward when people should realize how this actually works and maybe stop jumping to conclusions. We're going to talk about that with
some people have had some very rough off seasons.
We're going to get to all that and the Josh Naylor rumors, because this all ties together. So we're going to get to that. Oh no, my favorite player is being talked about in a trade rumor. Oh no. Look, I think we've done this before, and I don't want to tell anybody how to feel, but I feel like we've been here before. This comes up every offseason. I think we just said this last week even. The Guardians are going to listen on anybody not named Jose Ramirez. Like, there's a difference between, this is what happened when the Emmanuel Clase rumors popped up. It's not Cleveland saying, hey, we're trying to trade, we want to trade Clase, or we want to trade Josh Naylor. They're listening to offers, listening versus shopping. There's a difference in that context. And Jeff Passan is one of those people I would say, I don't know anybody else, but Jeff Passan is people I would say would be careful to put. That's why there's a reason he didn't get swept up in the Ohtani rumors. Yeah. Is that he would be careful to say listening. He said the Guardians are open to listening to offers to Class A, not saying the Guardians are shopping Class A, where he said that for Bieber. And there's a difference between Bieber and Class A. And I think, again, I said context matters. And the context matters here with the Josh Naylor thing, because the context here was, okay, teams are calling the Guardians.
Yes.
Of course. And of course they're going to call. And of course the Guardians are going to listen. Again, the Guardians listen to everybody except for Jose Ramirez. They're listening to every offer. And why do teams do this? Why does Cleveland do this? Because it gives them an idea of what other people think of their players. If there is some team out there crazy enough to say, we're willing to give Cleveland, and they don't know what Cleveland's value of Naylor is. They're not. I mean, they're other teams are getting an idea. The Pirates,
it's like if the Cubs call up and say something like, "We'll trade you Morel and whoever their top prospect is, and Matt Shaw," like Cleveland's probably like,
"Yeah, sure, we're going to do that." Right?
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll.
But if you're getting offers from other teams you don't like, you just turn it down. Yeah. But at least you now know, okay, this is how the market feels about this player. It's a way to gauge. I feel like we've said this over and over. It's a way, and I'm sure that people have said it too. So we're not breaking any news here, but it's a way for teams to gauge their value on their player. So when you see a headline that says this stuff, like, especially for Cleveland, we've been down this road before, and not to say they wouldn't trade Naylor, because I think that's a discussion worth having. That the idea of where they're at with Josh Naylor and where his career is at is certainly interesting, because the value of first baseman isn't all that attractive, especially.
And we've had those discussions with his health history, and and build and things like that. But I want to point something out in all of this, just to go a little off topic. So, why do these come out? And again, it's like, who is this benefiting? Why is it benefiting that teams are calling on Class A? Why is it benefiting that Josh Naylor teams are inquiring?
Teams want.
Well, it's also like, hey, if you're out there negotiating with a reliever, like, oh well, I mean, a Class A is available. He's a better candidate. You see that guy? Like, all of this is leverage. It's, oh, hey, maybe they're discussing trades with another team, and they're like, oh, like Josh Naylor's on the market. Or if your team, you're hoping that if this leaks out, that maybe another player you're discussing, another first baseman. I don't know. I wish I could sit there and tell you, like, Spencer Steer or something like that. I don't think that's the case. Jonathan India, maybe. Okay.
Mhm.
Even though the Reds, I don't know, Jonathan India is the most overrated player in baseball. I'll say it right now. But he's had one good year. Everything else is average, and he's a terrible defender. But let's say you're the White Sox, you're negotiating about Jonathan India, or you're probably not the Pirates or the Cubs, but someone like that. You can be like, we talked about this. I got to get back to you. We're having discussions about this player. You're trying to leverage. You're trying to get the best possible position. And what is really fascinating with all these is Cleveland's willing to every team is willing to listen on every player. Like Cleveland's not trading Jose Ramirez, but they're probably at least willing. Yeah, sure. Give us your best, because they can't. He's got no trade. He's not going anywhere. But teams will listen. Like it's the dumbest headline. They're listening. Every team is listening. Every team is listening. Like that is not a headline. That is baseball. That's just the truth of it. That is what happens in this sport. Every team is listening. So that isn't that when it comes out there as something bigger like this, it's because someone told someone it's the game of telephone, and it all of a sudden it got to the agent through a buddy or whatever who is friendly on an inside that hey, there's been discussions, but I mean, discussions can literally mean a team called and asked about availability,
and that gets reported. You might hear that from some agent or somebody. I don't know, depending on where that comes from. And GMs say this all the time. The GMs always will tell you like, if nobody's calling on this player, well, that means we don't have good players. So if they're calling on a player, like, is anybody calling and saying, hey, what would it take to get Miles Straw off your hands? Is anybody making that phone call? No. I don't know. No. I don't know. But if they're making phone calls on Class A, they're making phone calls on Josh Naylor, which means there is interest in them as a player, which is not a bad thing. And I realize a lot of people are like, oh, don't do this. I would hate that. And yeah, I understand why you would feel that way. But I think it's important. That's why I said, read past the headlines. Like, I understand this is what social media has turned us all into. It's clickbait. It's reading the headlines. We're not reading the stories. So you just see, oh, Cleveland's listening, or there's teams interested in Josh Naylor. That doesn't mean they're going to trade him. Like, read the actual story that accompanies the headline. You'll see, like Paul Hoynes even wrote this. He even said, like, Cleveland is not really interested in trading him, or that it doesn't make sense to because his lineup's already not good as it is, and trading him is unlikely to help fix their lineup. It only makes it worse. And the reason why that is because you would have to get someone to overpay for him. Like, Josh Naylor is more valuable to this team than he is as a trade candidate because he's 2 years away from free agency. He does have the injury history. There are maybe some conditioning issues. I don't really want to go too far with that because obviously I can't speak to that, but he's got, but he, what
do you mean? You and I both know conditioning issues.
Oh yeah. Well, that's true. We both know
we're experts when it comes to conditioning issues.
He's missed time every year. Like obviously 2021 he had the horrific leg injury. He missed time in 2022. He missed time a month last year with the oblique. He's 2 years from free agency.
He once stabbed a guy in the minors.
Yeah. Okay. It was a prank gone wrong. Let's clarify that. And he's coming off of a career year. He's coming off of a career year, and is he going to get better? I don't know. He's only 27, so maybe, but he's never slugged above 500. And first base isn't exactly except unless you're Matt Olson or any of those elite first basemen. Like, I don't think Naylor's quite in that category.
There's so many negatives. You're not going to get enough valuation for what you're going to lose, is basically what we're getting to. And
right. He's more valuable to Cleveland.
He's more valuable than anything you would get. Like, what is Pittsburgh going to trade you? They're not going to trade you the value of losing him. So he is the classic classic case of a player. It's like, he is the perfect guy. You run him out this year, you run him out next year. And I loved someone wrote a terrible article. Well, Cleveland with their money issues, he makes $7.2 million. I'm like, they're paying their backup catcher $4 million. 7.2. Yes. If everyone but 7.2 isn't backbreaking for this team. That was such a dumb statement. 7.2 is not backbreaking. That's not going to make them make a trade. Yeah. He has a great year. Next year, he could be close to 15. Guess what? Still not backbreaking. Think about what they gave Bell. So and they could give him the qualifying offer in a third year. Playing a 1-to-1 with him, with his all the negatives we talked about, makes perfect sense. And he is the perfect player to do it with because the valuation for what he brings the team is never going to match the trade market.
Exactly. So the reason they're listening is on the off chance that somebody gives them someone values him more than they do. And if that's the case, then you've improved your team. Probably, we'll see. I don't think it's going to happen, but I just encourage people to. No one's telling anybody how to feel. I think it would be stupid for them to trade him too. I wouldn't like it because I would highly doubt that they're going to get somebody back that makes more sense for them. But I do trust this front office enough to say that if they were to trade Josh Naylor, that it would be a trade that would be ridiculously almost one-sided, that they would get great value back. So there is that. I'm not telling them how to feel, but I just think it's all with what happened with Ohtani this weekend and this kind of stuff. You just need to remember to read past the headlines. Let's get full context. I know social media has turned us into all this. I understand, especially because Twitter or X is a wild west these days. But I don't know, reading, if we have time to read, it's very helpful, and online or offline. All right, so we are on a different schedule now with the off season. The winter meetings being passed, the holidays coming up. We are essentially 3 days a week. So we're planning this week to have episodes out today as you're listening, Wednesday and Friday. That's our schedule right now. It'll be that way until the new year. But Jeff, we have some good stuff coming up. We're talking about trade value with Josh Naylor. We want to talk about, we're going to kind of rank how the roster is trade value wise. So we're going to rank the guy who has the most trade value to the guy. It's kind of like prospect rankings of trade value rankings. So we're going to rank the 40-man roster 1 to 40 in terms of trade value. We'll probably throw in some guys that aren't in the 40, like, Manzardo and Ralphie Velasquez, and we'll talk about that and see where they fall in line. We'll do that coming up soon. We said we want to do an episode with 29 other teams talking about who Cleveland can make a deal with and for what. So we'll do some of those. And then we have positional reviews coming up to shortstop, third base, outfield, starting pitching, relief pitching. We have to do all those coming up soon. So there's a lot for us to talk about here. Even if we're on 3 days a week, we've got a lot to get to. And obviously, if any news pops up like today, we'll jump on that too. So stick with us.
100%. And thank you all for joining us. Remember to rate and review. It all helps the show grow as we continue to set record numbers. Thank you. And go Guardians, go.